Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of Getting to Know the Speaker for Flow Factor Conference, June 11th in South Jordan. Super excited today to introduce Nick Ihli of Google. He is going to be our keynote speaker at the event. Hi, Nick. How you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So why don't we just kind of jump in? Tell me a little bit about yourself, folks, to get to know you a little bit about your journey to becoming a software engineer.
Yeah, so I spent a good majority of my career actually in the high performance computing space and cloud orchestration space. Spent a lot of time working with engineers in national labs, government national labs, and academic sites as well, and was able to really get a love for just that complex technology where you're trying to use technology to solve interesting problems. And that's really where my love of software and all of that has come from, is just that desire to help people solve problems with technology. And the other aspect of my career is helping customers do that. So I'm less on the side of actually writing the code and software side, and more on helping customers find the ways that they can apply this different technology. So in the high performance computing world and cloud orchestration world, it was helping customers to understand and adopt high performance computing technologies and create their own public or their own private clouds before they really wanted to start moving to the public cloud. And so now, most recently, now with Google, I get to focus on that on the public cloud side of things.
Cool. Okay. And so when you say high performance computing, for folks that might not be familiar with that, I mean, I think we've all heard the phrase, but that has some very specific meanings. What can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, the other name is supercomputing, is another common name there. But base that idea where you have tens of thousands of computers sometimes on those big massive systems, all working together to solve a single instance, using aspects like message passing interfaces, MPI, to spread your workload across multiple machines there. And it's interesting where cloud computing is today is doing a lot of the same things that high performance computing has been doing years ago, but in just a little bit different way. And so it's fun. It was fun a few years ago as I started seeing that convergence of high performance computing and cloud computing kind of coming together. And Kubernetes is actually an interesting extension of what the world I lived in quite a bit with regards to scheduling. That's where we were focused on, was that scheduling of the workload in a high performance computing environment. And Kubernetes is kind of starting to become a major player in that area, where people are starting to adopt Kubernetes to do what kind of your traditional schedulers on the high performance computing side. So it's a really interesting convergence there. It's just fun to see the industry change over the years.
Nice, nice. And do you end up doing any high performance computing type work at Google now, or any of the clients you're?
Unfortunately, no. So I cover just the Utah territory, a handful of customers in Utah today that we work with, and helping them move their workloads from on-premise or maybe another cloud over to Google Cloud Platform. The customers I have, there's a few that have very little bit of HPC, but that's the near and dear to my heart. So whenever I get an opportunity to talk shop and talk about high performance computing, I definitely love to do that.
Nice. Well, and so you kind of touched on this notion of moving to the cloud, or maybe moving from one vendor to another, or maybe a hybrid solution. And earlier this year at Google I/O, there was a big talk about Anthos and a lot of that strategy within Google. What can you tell us about what that is, and why should people be interested in knowing more about what Google's doing there?
Yeah, so it's an interesting idea. You think about a company like Google and Google Cloud specifically, like their whole goal should be to just get everybody into their cloud. That should be their goal. But Google is looking at this going, good majority, I don't know the number off the top of my head right now, of enterprises are still on premise. And it's a slow process in moving to cloud. And in some cases, many of these sites will always be on premise for one reason or another. And so they're looking at it as, we need to also make it easy for people to adopt cloud technologies and move to the cloud But to do so, we need to pull down some of those barriers. And that barrier is that need to still have some type of footprint on premise versus at moving everything to the cloud. And so Anthos is a way of running Kubernetes on premise, but with the managed Google Kubernetes engine, GKE, that we have, but doing that on premise. And so you have a couple benefits from this. One, you allow Google to manage that cluster so that you're not having to focus so much on spinning up your own Kubernetes instance and updating it, et cetera. You can just focus on your code. But then for your workloads and clusters that you have in Google Cloud, you are able to manage those from one place, one console, manage the billing from one location. And so it removes a lot of those barriers that people have when they're wanting to move to the cloud, where if someone goes to Google Cloud and they have an on-premise environment still, they're having two very different management interfaces that they're dealing with. And that's just extra overhead that you have to deal with a staffing side of things from a knowledge perspective. And then the next step beyond that is other clouds. And at the announcement they made at Google Next with Anthos is that ability to start in the future to be able to also manage your clusters that are in maybe like Amazon Web Services. And so again, you have a single point of interface, single pane of glass for all of your clusters across your multi-cloud or your hybrid cloud environments. So ultimately, it's just kind of it's a step to remove those barriers and make the lives of the management side of this easier so that you can focus on your code. And the statement that Sundar mentioned at the Google Next was basically, our end goal is to get to the point to where you write your code once and you can deploy anywhere. And so you don't have to write your code in multiple different ways and methods to apply it, whether it's on-premise or one of the many cloud offerings out there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I appreciate hearing the detail, because when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, I wonder how they're really going to orchestrate that across multiple vendors, environments, on-prem, et cetera. So that's awesome. So during Flow Factor next month, you will be there kicking us off, talking a lot about the cloud, a little bit about Anthos and what Google's doing there, but really setting the tone for our event about cloud computing. One of the things that I've noticed in working with different clients is that cloud computing in a way levels the playing field, right? Like two companies that are both going to GCP have the same set of services available. It's not like because I only spend a few $100s a month, I don't have access to everything that a multi-million-dollar company has. So one of the terms I've heard for that is undifferentiated work, right? It's the services the cloud provider brings to the table that everybody could leverage. Can you tell me a little bit about what your perspective personally is about leveraging those cloud services, and how do you help your clients sort of get exposed to those services? Because there's a lot, right, that GCP offers, and how somebody coming new to the environment is like, I don't know what the 100 different tools are. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, you're right. You look at the menu, and with other cloud providers as well, you have a whole bunch of options. And so, where do you start? And that's kind of the role that I play, is to go sit down with the customer and kind of find out what are you trying to do? What are your current workloads? How can we use those features that we have within Google Cloud that kind of has been democratized for all these different organizations to be able to take advantage of? So with regards to that, yeah, it's a challenge for customers, and you can one of the biggest mistakes that customers make is they now are exposed. Even a small organization, large organization are now exposed to a whole bunch of capability, and you can let costs run wild if you don't put in the proper policies and controls with regards to billing and your IAM policies and whatnot. So that's really important to do from the get-go. What we try to do with customers from the very beginning is let's set you up properly within your organization. Make sure there's budgets in place. Make sure everybody has the correct permissions. People don't have too much permission. What's going on, because we've seen this from multiple customers where they'll go into one cloud And they have found out they've wasted millions of dollars, either purchasing instances that, from a reserve mentality to get those discounts, but they never use them, to instances where they just have massive cloud sprawl and are spending a ton of money for nothing. So when they come over to GCP, we want to set them up in the right way. So that's kind of that first step. And another interesting thing to note about Google's offerings that is interesting is when you are on premise, you are running everything yourself. You're finding these great open source tools, but the expertise is a lot of times on you, and you're having to figure things out. What happens with, especially with Google Cloud, what the offerings we have, many of the offerings we have, things like BigQuery, things like our storage, our databases like Spanner, Kubernetes for one, so GKE. They are all projects that we actually had internally for many, many years. And we refined them and used them, and they helped run Google Search and Google Gmail and G Suite and multiple billion plus user products that we have. And to be able to support that, we've had to create all these different tools. And now we are providing those tools out to enterprises to take advantage of and use. And so when you take advantage of a Google service like that, you are basically not only getting that service, but years of experience in refining that service, updating it, patching it, and really pushing it to its limits because it's had to support Google itself.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that sounds like a great spot for us to sort of wrap up and let folks know that you'll, again, be doing the keynote. I think will be a great way to kick things off. And before we wrap up, we have a little Easter egg with each person we're chatting with, a question that you will put out to people that are going to be attending the event, a question for them to think about, and then they can approach you with that question or tell you what they were thinking about with that question. And that will let you know that, oh, you got to the end of the video, you got to hear everything we chatted about. And so we had chatted about this a little bit earlier in our discussion today. So what question do you have for folks?
So my question would be just kind of more general of what is your cloud strategy? We ask that to a lot of people, and typically their answers are a lot of ums and uhs and they've thought about it, but they haven't really thought about it. So what is your cloud strategy? Do you even have one?
Okay, that's awesome and a great spot to wrap up. So thanks so much, Nick, for being available today.
Thanks for having me.
Can't wait to see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, well, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.